Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Are you a survivor of abuse or other trauma? Are you tired of feeling stuck, silent, and stressed all the time? This is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with more inner peace and joy. Are you ready to eliminate suffering from your life and transform from a survivor to thriver? Then congratulations, you are in the right place. Let's get started. Hey, I'm so glad to have you back with me for the Survivor to Thriver show. Today is a great day for you to have checked in because today I'm going to move on to the next major phase of my story, my journey from survivor to thriver. We're going to get to talk about the very first major breakthrough that I had. But before I do that, let me put things in a little bit of context. So by this point in time, where the breakthrough happens, now I'm about 14 years old, and besides whatever was going on with me internally, and I talked about that in quite a bit of detail in the last few episodes, at an external level, there was another major shift that occurred in my life, namely that my family moved once again. And this was also another international move, and this time we moved from the Middle East to Pakistan. And just in case you're curious, how does someone go from India to the Middle East to Pakistan? It's because my dad's from India and my mom is from Pakistan. And if you know anything about the two countries, India and Pakistan, we are always at loggerheads. Personally, my experience has been that our people are essentially the same people. I mean, we have more in common than we have. We have more in common than we have in difference. Okay, so for me, like really in my mind and experience, the people of India and Pakistan are really one people, but our two countries, especially at the level of our politics, there's a lot of divisiveness, there's a lot of conflict. And although after my mother got married to my dad, she moved to India so she could be with him, it was not, unfortunately, a very sustainable situation because there was constant trouble when my mother wanted and needed to be able to go back to her own family in Pakistan. And even living in India itself, we faced some challenges as a family that was half Indian and half Pakistani. So we initially moved to the Middle East seeking some neutral ground, but also my parents were seeking better opportunities for us, their kids, right? The opportunity for better education, especially. And then life happened. We thought we were well settled in the Middle East. We didn't really think we would have to move again, but life happened. A number of complications occurred, because of which it basically became impossible for us to continue to live in the Middle East. And so while my parents were going to figure out where we could go to next, my mother decided to take us kids back to Pakistan with her. And so that, while my dad stayed in the Middle East and figured things out, we would have a stable and loving home to be in, with my mom's side of the family in Pakistan. And the thing was, our expectation was that within a few months, maybe 6-7 months max, the issues would be resolved, and then we would be able to be in one place again, our whole family together. So that was the intention with which we arrived in Pakistan, and that is why I didn't take admission into a school in Pakistan when I got there. And the first so many months of my being there, I was like, oh, I'm out of school. I have nothing to do. This is awesome. Right? But after about 6 months of being there, it was like, oh, I'm out of school and I have nothing to do, and this is kind of depressing. Right? I mean, talk about how a change in our perspective and our mindset can, really shift our experience of a situation. But in any case, so the reason I'm telling you this is because that those few months in Pakistan actually ended up turning into a few years, and this whole time we were separated from my dad, and it caused some stress in our family, that having to be separate in this way, and there were just other things going on. So in addition to me having to deal with all the anger and the fear and the sense of disempowerment that I'd been struggling with as a result of my experience of child sexual abuse, now on top of that, I was having to deal with these stresses of being separated from my dad, being having moved again to a new country, and being out of school for the first year, and just again being in a place where being out of my comfort zone again, and being out of what I'd become familiar to in the Middle East. And so it was like causing a lot of extra stress in my life. And remember how I was sharing in earlier episodes, like I was at a place in my life where I just didn't know how to deal with my emotions. And like, and the best thing that I could do was avoidance, go in denial. Only by this point in time, that was no longer an option. And no longer an option. I had moved so far ahead into the process that denial was no longer working for me. And so what actually started happening was that I started shifting into a depression phase, right? Where it was like, oh, this is all too much, and I don't know how to heal this anymore, and there's just too much, and I don't know how to help myself. I don't know how to heal from this. I don't know how to come out of this. I just can't even, the denial thing's not even working anymore. So I started shifting into like this depression stage, and in that, luckily, now, when, of course, this is something I've come to believe and know, and through the experience of my heart and soul, the wisdom of my heart and soul, is that we're never burdened with more than we can bear. And, like these ideas, these sayings, that the darkest points, the darkest part of the night is right before the dawn, right? Or, the rainbow comes out only after the storm, these kinds of things. So this was kind of like what I was moving towards, and I didn't realize that I was heading towards a point of major breakthrough. But it was just that until I got to the breakthrough point, things got pretty kind of like dark, and I was starting to feel really quite depressed. And as part of that depression, I had started to isolate myself even more, become even more introverted. And so what I had started doing was, and the way that I isolated myself, and I tried to escape all the drama and the tension and the stress of my life, was I turned into a bookworm. And I was reading, being all of like 14 years old, I wasn't at that point in time reading books of philosophy or anything like that. I was reading books of fiction. I was reading books written for young adults, books of adventure and mystery, and so on and so forth. Things that allowed me to escape my life and enter into the life of the characters in those books, and kind of just forget about me and just be present with these characters, with these stories. So I guess I was still kind of denying and in denial, or trying to do it. But here's the good news. Here's where the good news happened, is that I was still living and growing as part of a loving family, right? Who loved me, who protected me. And so it wasn't like I was just reading any books. Actually, for the last many years, my brother had been my filter. My older brother, he would select the books that I would read. Like, he would be like, "Here, Samia, here you go. These are the books that you may read. These are good books. You will enjoy them." So he was my filter. Once I got to Pakistan, there was a shift that occurred, and that just things happened, and I was actually, I started to select my own books. And not to say that my brother's selections were bad, they were awesome, but I started to select my own books when I was in Pakistan. And I started selecting books that spoke to me and spoke to my emotions and my needs, right? And one of the very first books that I picked up that had a huge impact, there were actually two books that I picked up that my brother would never have given to me, that had a huge impact on me. This first book was The Diary of Annie Frank. For those of you who don't know, Annie Frank was a Jewish girl. She and her family lived during World War II, and their family actually had to go into hiding to escape being sent into concentration camps. And the Diary of Annie Frank, Annie is talking about and relating her experiences during their time of hiding. And then actually their family eventually was caught and sent into concentration camps. And unfortunately, Annie died in the concentration camps, but her diary kind of takes us up to the point where, they're still hidden and they're still safe but having to deal with that situation of being stuck in this attic, of this building and not being able to leave, to even being able to step outside of that space for years. And then the second book that I picked up was the autobiography of Johnny, with a Christian girl, and she actually had, when she was around 18 or 19 years old, she had an accident that left her paralyzed from the neck down. And in the aftermath of the paralysis, I mean, you can imagine what kind of trauma she experienced and the helplessness that she struggled with being paralyzed from the neck down. And she actually also fell into a deep depression, and to the point where she became suicidal and wanted to kill herself. But she literally couldn't do anything to kill herself. She tried to stop eating and drinking, but they force-fed her. She begged people to just let her go, to kill her, and they refused to kill her. They refused to let her die. And so she became so helpless and so depressed, with that helplessness. But despite the struggle, like this point of deep depression, Johnny came out of it. And she tells the story in her autobiography of how she came out of it and made a life for herself where she not only was surviving but thriving in her life, without ever having any hope of recovery, without ever regaining movement in her body. She was nonetheless able to come out of that depression, that trauma, and begin to thrive again in her life. So I had these two girls that I read about, and they had gone through traumas that were very different than mine, but I related to their age. I related to, like, they were very close to my age. I related to the depth and the magnitude of the trauma that they experienced. And I really resonated with what they shared in their writing about how they dealt with their circumstances and how they overcame it, and how they went from merely surviving to actually thriving in their lives. So I will tell you more about what that common thread was between the stories of Annie and Johnny, and what I learned from it, and how it really helped me to achieve my first big breakthrough on my own journey to healing and transformation from being a survivor to thriver. And in the meanwhile, I wish you lots of peace and joy, and I want to remind you to leave me your comments, leave me your feedback. You can do that very easily by going to my website at www.academyofthriving.com. Go to the Contact Us page on the Academy of Thriving, and you'll be able to connect with me very easily that way. All right, so have an excellent day today, and I will see you tomorrow.